And armed with mobile phones and laptops, the people are using technology to get their voice heard. To the micro-blogging site Twitter next. This unconfirmed report just in from Ras Lanuf, the oil town which the government insists it's taken control of, reports that a pro-Gaddafi helicopter gunship has been downed in Ras Lanuf. And this tweet from about the anti-government protest in the Libyan capital. The protests in the Tajura district of Tripoli were broken today, some 45 minutes after security forces moved in. And here's a lesson in linguistics. While the media describes anti-Gaddafi fighters as rebels, we describe them in Arabic as Thawar, revolutionaries. Now, after Friday prayers in Egypt, people took to the streets once again, some clearly frustrated with the slow pace of change. In Alexandria, state security officers were charged by demonstrators, and attacks on state security seem to be spreading. Reports on people in Asyut about to lay siege to state security there too. Hope it's all true. All SS officers shake with fear. And this from a neighbourhood in Cairo. I had a family pass by Ain El Dawli in Doki. It's calm. The state security are surrounding their place. We need more people there. And staying with those attacks on security services, time when the impossible is possible. Protesters are in state security HQ in Alexandria. The army are arresting SS officers. Now, of course, you can keep up to date with all the latest from the region. As ever, the address is www.aljazeera.net/English. We've got live blogs keeping you up to date from Libya, Egypt, Bahrain, plus our own dedicated web correspondents, as well as a network of teams across the world bringing you analysis, reporting, opinion from the heart of what's happening. But for now, back to you.
Thanks, Imran. Let's go back to Libya now. And the fighting in Libya has prompted a refugee crisis on a massive scale. Some 180,000 foreign workers have streamed across Libya's borders. The United Nations says more than 90,000 have fled to Tunisia and some 80,000 have crossed into Egypt. Another 2,500 have crossed at the Niger border. But while agencies are warning of a growing crisis for these refugees, thousands more are still stuck inside Libya. Bernard Smith reports.
Thousands of Bangladeshis are the latest in a stream of refugees to make it across the border from Libya into Tunisia. Waiting for them, a tent camp that can house up to 20,000 people. It's already full. But aid from Europe and the United States is arriving, and the process of moving these people home is picking up. Britain, France and the US are providing aircraft to help the evacuation. The UN says that the number of refugees crossing into Tunisia has actually dropped significantly because the border there is now manned by heavily armed pro-Gaddafi forces. So almost all of Libya's neighbours could end up dealing with fleeing workers. Some have now fled through Algeria, further down Libya's western frontier. And up to 100,000 people may try to cross into Niger in the coming months. That's according to the UN. At Egypt's frontier with Libya, hundreds of African refugees are stranded in a border no man's land. Some have been there for days. Here, the Egyptian authorities have tightened security, fearing that mercenaries hired by Gaddafi may try to flee to Egypt. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
Crowds in Jordan's capital, Amman, have been demanding political reforms and a constitutional monarchy. Jordan's Prime Minister has rejected calls to strip King Abdullah of his powers. The government has made several concessions in the past month, but opposition groups say they don't go far enough. There's been further unrest on the streets of Bahrain as protesters call for sweeping political reforms. Thousands of anti-government demonstrators surrounded state television headquarters in the town of Issa. It follows clashes between Sunni and Shia groups on Thursday, the first direct confrontation between the two sides since the start of large-scale protests. There have been rallies both for and against Oman's ruler. Anti-government protesters gathered in the Sultanate's second biggest city, Sohar, to demand political reform, an end to corruption and higher wages. Our special correspondent is there, and for his own safety, we're not naming him.
Friday prayer in Oman's second largest city of Sohar, and more than 2,000 protesters turned the main traffic intersection into a place of worship. The anti-government sentiment here in Oman differs from the rest of the region's turmoil in two key ways. There's been much less violence and much more love for their leader.
We are making this to support the Sultan, not to face the Sultan. This is another thing. We are just facing the corruption here.
Sultan Qaboos Al Sayed brought peace to Oman soon after taking power in a palace coup 41 years ago. He also delivered paved roads, a public health system and more women's rights than other Gulf countries. But like the rest of the Arab world, Omanis now yearn for more.
The protesters' demands are listed very clearly right here in the middle of the roundabout. Number one is to dismiss all government ministers and investigate them for corruption. Number two is they want a new parliament elected by the people. And number three is to find more jobs for Omanis and raise everybody's salaries.
Military helicopters buzz over the crowd, but there hasn't been a repeat of last week's violence, where at least one protester was killed by riot police, while a shopping centre, police station and government building were all torched. These protesters say they denounce acts of violence, but hope a calm, peaceful plea will be heard by their beloved leader.
If he did know, he will change, we are sure.
How long do you plan to stay here for?
Until all our demands will be achieved.
The role of the military is key here now, respected by the people much more than the police, but they have very little experience in dealing with civil unrest, leaving the days ahead filled with uncertainty.
Yemen's president has rejected opposition proposals for a transfer of power. Ali Abdullah Saleh is sticking to his earlier offer to step down when his term ends in 2013. Demonstrators in the capital, Sana'a, have been demanding his immediate resignation. Hashim Ahlbara reports.
Sana'a University Square, the focal point of the anti-government demonstrations. Again, thousands gathered after Friday prayers, chanting the slogans which have echoed across the country. The president has to go. Opposition members take to the podium, reminding the crowds that their fight will be a protracted one, but that eventually President Saleh will be forced out.
I wish if he understands to get out from our home, because we want to be free. We want to be free. Please, Ali, get out.
At their own rally, President Saleh's loyalists are firing back. They gathered in thousands in a show of support for their beleaguered leader. Influential tribesmen, clerics, and members of his ruling party joined anti-government protesters, accusing him of dragging his heels on reform.
This is Tahrir Square. This is where the anti-government protesters initially wanted to gather, but they were denied access to this site, which is now occupied by Ali Abdullah Saleh's loyalists. As you can see behind me, they are very defiant. They're brandishing banners and posters saying that the president remains the symbol of unity and stability, and that the future of Yemen can only be decided through ballot box.
The government and official media denounces the protesters as anarchists, conspiring with Western powers to destabilize the country.
Yeah, I'd like to tell the world that Ali Abdullah Saleh is our father.